The other day I was traveling and the driver's name was Yakub Reddy, and then there was a Mehboob Naik.
Right.
So when I had conversations with them, they said,
Right.
well, my parents had a mannat. అక్కడ సూఫీ బాబా దగ్గర ఆ శ్రైన్కి వెళ్ళేసి దర్గా వెళ్ళేసి మొక్కుకున్నారు. దెర్ ఈస్ అ కోట్ ఇన్ యువర్ బుక్, యువర్ హిస్టరీ కీప్స్ గెటింగ్ ఇన్ ద వే ఆఫ్ మై మెమరీ. व्हेन आई रेड दैट, मैं 2 मिनट के लिए एकदम खामोश हो गया था कि सच अ पॉइगनेंट स्टेटमेंट. सबसे पहले तो मैं आई वांट टू वेलकम अफसार मोहम्मद साहब. He teaches at the University of Pennsylvania in the Department of South Asian Studies, and he's an author of the recently published book called Remaking History, 1948 Police Action and the Muslims of Hyderabad. So sir, welcome to Hyderabad. Welcome to siyasat.com. It's an honor and privilege to have you here.
Thank you so much, Moses, Indian Siyasat team, for this opportunity. It's actually, I feel like it's an honor for me.
Sir, सबसे पहले तो हम we'll talk about the book a little bit and then we'll get into the other topics.
Sounds good.
So if you can give our audience a brief overview of the book and how was the idea born, why was it born, and a little bit background about you yourself, that would be great.
Moses, actually it's a long story, not easy to cut it short, but I'll try to make it very brief. So the beginnings of this work actually were in 2006 when I was conducting field research for my previous book on Mohammed practices among Hindus. By chance I met Qudus Sahib, who was at that point I think 76 years old. He was well known for his Urdu and Telugu Muharram song performances.
Which year are we talking about?
It's 2006.
2006.
So when I documented his performance, of course he was also teaching some young, like 18 to 30 years age group young performers. So he wanted to keep this tradition alive, and then he started teaching to this young generation, and then they were around us when I was talking to Hudu Sahib. During the conversation, he started talking about 1948 police action. He must be some 17 or 18 years old at that point, and then suddenly there was a lot of pain when he started talking about this entire violence, and then I felt like he was still carrying the trauma. But because I was focusing on Muharram narratives, I didn't pay that much attention to his stories about police action, and also his students. They were actually more excited about Muharram than other things. But later, when I started rethinking our conversations, then I felt that why we are talking about Muharram when we should talk about this immediate history. So Muharram was like 7th century, and then this came from 1948, and then I remembered Qudus Sahib said one thing. He said, we are always fascinated by remote past. We should talk more about immediate past. Being a Muslim, you should be aware what happened in your immediate past. And then rethinking the same statement repeatedly,
If I can interrupt, although Muharram plays a very integral role in the syncretic culture of Telangana,
Right.
on top of it, we also should talk about our immediate history. Is that what you're trying to?
Yeah, that's what he was trying to say, because he was like talking about two things. So of course we need to talk about the things that combine that we share as a community, not just as Hindu, not just as Muslim. So this is a tradition that is built for, or that is surviving on the value of syncretism and then shared culture, shared histories. And then on the other hand, he was also talking about this larger question of Muslim identity and belonging. So he was actually, he mentioned Bahadur Yarjang during that conversation, and then I was quite amazed. How come he was talking about Bahadur Yarjang from this 1940s history? We always think that Bahadur Yarjang was just a figure confined to Hyderabadi history. But when I heard this from some remote Telangana urban area, it was quite fascinating for me. How come Bahadur Yarjang came all the way to this remote Telangana village? So I started thinking about the histories of these public figures, Muslim figures. What is their role in the making of Hyderabadi past? And then when I started looking at materials, unfortunately I couldn't find anything. No written documents. No, even Sundarlal committee's report was not available at that point, right? So rather I started collecting these oral histories. Wherever I go, I came here in 2006 and then I did continuous research, field research until 2007, and then I came back in 2012 and then I came back again in 2014. So during these different periods, I was meeting so many people who witnessed this military invasion in 1948. And then I was talking to their family members. I was trying to locate written materials related to this violence. And then it kind of became really difficult for me to find anything written. Then okay, this story should be told from a different methodology, not like traditional methods. Then I came up with this idea of writing a book. And then I also want to talk about, there are so many other questions in the making of this book. One big question is about history itself. We can talk about it later.
How is the book, structured? If you can, what are all the major topics that are covered?
So I had, that's another big challenge when working on this material. I must say I had very limited materials when I started working on this book. And then I gathered everything that I had, written material, media reports, and then these oral testimonies, family histories, caste histories, so much material there. And then it was difficult for me to figure out where to focus. I just don't want to give so much in a single book.
Because the scale is pretty large. And that is what I, when I first got a copy of the book, I was like, how did sir, manage with such a big scope?
It's it's not easy. It's not, because we operate within the available light, particularly in historical studies. It's always very difficult, because we are so used to traditional, conventional methodologies. And then this is about Muslims. It's much more complicated than studying other communities. So we don't have enough resources, enough methodologies to pull together all these materials. So I thought I should focus more on oral testimonies at first. And when I met Jaini Mallaya Gupta before I think 2017, he actually opened up my eyes to written materials. He started talking about siyasat. Jaini Mallaya Gupta was an active member of Readers Club in Nalgonda. So they started reading siyasat But before siyasat, because siyasat was in 1949, right? And then before siyasat, they started reading progressive literature published in Urdu. And then their entire literary career, he was just a reader and then activist, nothing to do with writing or like any cultures. He spoke with me for so many hours, and then he picked up some materials from old siyasat and then started reading some poetry published in siyasat, because at that point siyasat was so active in circulating progressive literature. So he was giving all this history before police action, during police action, and after police action, and then how Urdu culture promoted the idea of Muslim identity. So he gave me really good, wonderful tools. And then I came up with this idea that, oh yeah, it's not just about Telugu writing, or we should also talk about Urdu. So I started talking about Urdu and Telugu, bilingual writings and their literary culture. So theoretically, because I came up with more than 12 topics when I started working on the book, but I thought 12 topics is like too much, and then I actually confined it to 5 topics, 5 top categories that defined the history of police action and the Muslim question. So that is where I started.
He's also a very funny man. I had interviewed him, and he was telling me it's Bongir, right? He's from Bongir.
Yeah, right.
He how there was a library movement,
Right.
the
Yeah.
initiation of a library movement in Telangana, and how they were arrested for it.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful, wonderful interview I have of him. It's a wonderful human being, and I had the honor of taking him to a Urdu mushaira.
Oh, okay.
There was one day out of the blue he called me and said,
Right.
मोजेस यहाँ पे उर्दू मुशायरा हो रहा है और कोई भी नहीं है, अगर आप मुझे ले जा सकते हैं, दैट वुड बी एन ऑनर सर.
Right.
सो वी वेंट टू द ये दारुसलाम में हो रहा था,
अच्छा.
तो वहाँ पे जाके हमने दोनों साथ में
अच्छा.
मुशायरा अटेंड की थी. सो सर ये जो देयर इज अ कोट इन योर बुक, योर हिस्ट्री कीप्स गेटिंग इन द वे ऑफ माई मेमोरी. व्हेन आई रेड दैट, मैं 2 मिनट के लिए एकदम खामोश हो गया था कि सच अ पॉइगनेंट स्टेटमेंट. एंड इट ऑल्सो, अगर पुलिस एक्शन के बारे में हम बात करेंगे, इट कैप्चर्स द एसेंस ऑफ द डिस्टॉर्टेड
Right.
हिस्ट्री, डिस्टॉर्टेड द सप्रेशन ऑफ हिस्ट्री रादर.
Right.
तो उसके बारे में अगर आप कुछ
Yeah,
एलॉबरेट
actually-
करेंगे तो वेयर डिड द
actually-
कोट कम फ्रॉम? एंड
Aga Shahid Ali was talking about Kashmir in that line. But in 1998, when L.K. Advani came to Hyderabad, it was the 50th year of the police action. And Advani was talking about the police action, and also he was talking more about this idea of liberation. He gave a call for the Telangana liberation. So he wanted to celebrate. BJP actually wanted to celebrate this as a Telangana Liberation Day. So then I had a question. I was very young. I was like struggling with my own creative writing. I had so many questions because I have seen history starting in 1992. And then this came up in 1998. Then I actually like struggling with this memory of police action, and then how could we talk about this memory? There were thousands of Muslims were killed, and then some thousands migrated to other parts of the world. Then what is the logic? What is like the rationale in making this a celebration? So that was like, I felt like should be a response to this. And then because my work depends heavily on the memory, because most of the stories come from memory of all the public figures who were alive, who witnessed police action, who witnessed the killings of Muslims in Deccan. So I was memory kind of that public memory, that memory of Muslims, that memory of Hindus about Muslims and Christians. So the memory about the places like Usmanabad, Marathwada, and also like some parts of Telangana. So this is like this history kind of never documented, right? We know a lot of history was written about Telangana rebellion, about leftist activism, about Telugu linguistic state, but I felt, what about this memory? Where is this gone? And then when I started thinking about, there were tensions between, theoretically there are like what is memory, what is history, how should we include this memory into history? So then I thought this memory always comes an obstacle to this normative history, right? So to write this history, to use this memory as a tool in my book, in my method research, in my theorization of police action, I thought there should be a way of remaking this historiography. The title actually comes from that theoretical struggle.
And timing wise, I think it was, I mean, this is the last generation that is left,
right,
who can give us first hand stories, right? Most of the people should be in their 80s and 90s now.
Right.
And once they are gone,
right,
that memory is gone.
right,
And when I personally was talking to some of the survivors, they, like you were saying in our previous talk at Lamakan, a lot of them initially hesitated. They confessed to me later that they had not shared these stories with their children or grandchildren because they do not want to relive those memories.
right, right.
It's a very uncomfortable feeling. And they were okay to share it with a stranger,
Right.
but not with their loved ones because they don't want their loved ones to, catch a glimpse of the trauma. So if you can talk about, I mean, what was your experience talking to some of the survivors?
Between 2006 and 2017, I think, I have interviewed 100 people. All these 100 people, they witnessed this military invasion and violence. They lost their families, lost their friends. They lost that, particularly when Khudu Sahib was talking about this, he said that the ihsan of Telangana Tehzeeb, the ihsan means beauty of Telangana Tehzeeb was gone because of police action. So, unfortunately, during the COVID and after also the COVID, we lost 90 people.
Wow.
So this book, this is a very sad thing to say. This book is the last document of those witnesses. So when I actually felt so bad because when I was finishing this book in 2022, I was actually listening to these interviews on my voice recorder. Every day, it was like so sad. Like I was like crying almost, listening to their wonderful, amazing voices, their memories, their singing, their conversations, because I also took note of their conversations with their family members and their younger generation kids. So to show that how they were, as you saying, how they were struggling to keep this memory. my own family, like, never shared anything about this. My grandma and her family, they were very active in Telangana rebellion.
And I found it very strange.
Very strange. And,
And
then when I asked about this, just forget about all the bad things that happened in the
yeah,
history.
exactly. That
It's
was the
like,
response, even to me. Yeah.
we have a lot of good things to talk about. And then let's talk about good things. क्यों ये बेकार चीज़ों के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं आप? सिर्फ ये अच्छी चीज़ें बहुत सारे हो गए, मिल गए, अब इतने साल गुजर गए. एक अच्छी बात करने की कोशिश कीजिए.
Right.
ये खून जा रही है, सब इसके बारे में क्यों? So they actually discouraged me to write about police
Yeah.
action. They don't want to relive.
I believe it because I experienced it firsthand.
Right. They don't want to relive that moment.
Yeah.
That was, I feel that. I feel that pain when I was talking to them. And then the new generation, when I was documenting, interviewing these witnesses, there were this new generation, like 20, 25 age group. They were so like taken back. What is this you are talking about? We don't even know this. And then you are saying this exactly at the right moment when we got the independence, and then we are celebrating independence.
Right.
Azadi. And then you have this violence. There is little difference, like time difference, temporal.
And because we were not taught our own history,
Right.
we were only taught about Indian independence movement.
Right.
It's very confusing for the new
Very,
generation.
very confusing.
How do they even process this information? And in that regard, I'm glad you brought up that phrase, Hyderabadi tehzeeb.
Right.
So a lot of younger generation, they ask me, भाई ये चीज़ क्या है? आप लोग बात करते रहते हो हैदराबादी तहजीब के बारे में. And then there is also the larger Telangana tehzeeb, right? Which is even more difficult to understand.
Right.
So Hyderabadi tehzeeb is more like an urban-centered, Hyderabad-centric, tehzeeb where non-Muslims had, take part in the lehja, the culinary experience of the, the Muslim culture. But that is at least understandable to an extent.
Right.
But this larger Telangana tehzeeb, where Muslims of Telangana take part in the Telugu culture, the day-to-day, Telugu-ness, wo abhi tak people have not spoken about it, or people might have spoken about it, people have not heard it, especially the new generation.
Right.
So if you can shed some light on this, both the Hyderabadi tehzeeb and the larger Telangana tehzeeb, that would be informative to our audience.
Really good question. Actually, Moses, when I gave a talk at the Lama Khan, one thing that I was so fascinated was about, there were a lot of Muslim young men and women in the age group of 20 to 35. They are really active. They are doing so many different things. They might not be doing academic writing, they might not be teaching, they are not, but they are outside this world, they are doing so much. So one person who simply said, you just wrote my family history. I always heard about this from my grandparents and their friends, but I never read anything written about it. And then when I read this book, my immediate reflection was, oh yeah, he is telling my story. So one thing, Moses, I want to make it clear is that people, particularly in Telangana and Deccan, they know about this tehzeeb, idea of tehzeeb, but they don't know how that works.
Exactly.
So they know
they may be experiencing it in their daily life, but what I noticed it is the articulation that they are lacking of what it is.
So when you talk to Telugu, even 18 to 25 age group, even though they are all in a different world, like technology, science, and other things, nothing to do with history or any sociology or anything. But in everyday life, when they speak, they use this shared vocabulary between Telugu and Urdu. Even a simple conversation in everyday life
without even realizing.
demonstrates that shared vocabulary between Telugu and Urdu. As we were talking about earlier, అరే జర కాస్త ఆగ్రా బాయ్ మస్తు పరేషాన్ చేస్తున్నావురా బాయ్ నువ్వు దిస్ ఈస్ లైక్ both Telugu and Urdu expression.
అరే
Right?
వాడు గలీజ్
So
చూడరా.
that is what,
yeah.
that is how tehzeeb works in everyday life. It begins with conversations, and then goes to food, and then goes to our meetings. Right? They have like wonderful friends with the Muslim community. Even after all these tragedies, incidents, they are still great friends with Muslim community. They are so friendly, milansar with all this Muslim community. They work together.
As we were
show
talking
so
to Ayub
much.
sir, there's no village in Telangana where there are no Muslim families.
Right.
So yeah.
So, but that is what when I like try to theorize this entire situation, like tehzeeb culture, I still go back to Hudus Sahib's statements. Bahram is at the root of all this tehzeeb. So Bahram taught you the value of sharing, and then we are lucky enough in Telangana and Deccan particularly to have this rich legacy of Sufism. Everywhere you go, you have this shrine culture. You see non-Muslims more than Muslims
Yeah.
in the premises of Sufi shrines, right? Dargahs.
The other day I was traveling and the driver's name was Yaqub Reddy, and then there was a Mehboob Naik.
Right.
So when I had conversations with them, they said,
Right.
well, my parents had a mannat. అక్కడ సూఫీ బాబా దగ్గర శ్రైన్కి వెళ్ళేసి దర్గాకి వెళ్ళేసి మొక్కుకున్నారు.
అవును.
అప్పుడు నేను పుట్టాను.
అవును.
కాబట్టి ఆ బాబా పేరు నాకు పెట్టారు.
అవును.
So it's such a beautiful stories.
Right, lot of stories. I have like so many stories about that in my previous book, The Festival of Peace. And then in this book, I actually I'm using the similar idea, but I wanted to focus on police action because for me, that's a turning point. So that's a turning point not only like as related to like Hindu-Muslim interactions at a broader level, but also we need some vocabulary to talk about this tehzeeb. And then this book actually tries to retrieve some of that vocabulary from our shared histories. And then if you look into each chapter, there are only 5 chapters in the book. Each chapter focuses on one concept that helps us to see how tehzeeb works.
That's great. One other notion that I see, especially among the younger generation, or ki it is after the police action itself was implemented with a binary, right? Some sort of Hindu-Muslim.
Right.
The king was Muslim, so he was, suppressing the Hindus, and the Indian government had to come and liberate these,
Right.
liberate these people. ये जो, but then if you actually read history,
Right.
then we see there was nothing like that. Actually, in actuality, there were Muslims in every people's movement.
Right.
Whether it's the Mulki movement from the 50s, whether it's the communist movement.
Right.
So there's a huge participation of Muslims in the communist movement of
Right.
Telangana that we hardly ever talk about. And then even in the struggle for separation of statehood,
Right.
we have so much of Muslim participation.
Right.
So if you could educate our audience on, how do we break this binary? Because, I mean, we have truth that goes against
Right.
this binary. How do we access this thought?
This is a big challenge even now, because even now, I say even now because we experienced so much in the last 3 or 4 decades, beginning with 1992 Babri Masjid, the demolition, and then we had this Gujarat.
So, if you could shed some light on the Muslim participation in the various people's struggles,
Right.
the various people's movements we've had,
right.
like Mulki movement, the communist movement, especially which witnessed a huge participation of Muslims, and the struggle for separation of statehood.
Right. So I think for me as a historian and also as a writer, Muslim being and belongingness remains at the center of all my work. So whenever I look into some historical event or public figure or something related to history, I always look for, is there any discussion about Muslim being and belonging there? So I try to, it's a deliberate choice. I don't know whether it is right or not, but there is no option for me. Because I want to focus more on how things were going during those particular historical moments. So there was huge Muslim participation in Telangana rebellion, progressive writers movement, Indian People's Theatre, and other leftist wings as well. Muslim presence was always there in every aspect, in every event. But the way histories are being written, the historiography itself, I would say, is Hindu dominant, upper caste dominant, and then there is also male dominant. So we need to break all these frameworks, conventional frameworks, to speak about one marginalized identity. So that is where actually my theoretical or theorization about Muslims comes. And also, unfortunately, we don't have sufficient resources or data to talk about Muslims, or even to talk about women within these movements. So there is so much to do to dig this archaeology of knowledge. So we need to at the Lamakan workshop, we were also talking about how we are going to cultivate this culture of tehzeeb among the new generation. We should have more workshops like you did at the Lamakan. We need to recover that history in various ways. But I also, as a writer, I would say that it's not just about the history. We also need to connect that history with the present. Because most events in the Hyderabadi past, you might go back to medieval periods, and then pre-modern times, and the beginnings of modernity, and then current times. We have to make a deliberate choice to study, to understand what is happening with the communities at the margins. So we need more workshops. That's what happened during the police action among the Muslim community in Hyderabad. So the public intellectuals of that time, they actually started doing these different kinds of activities, educating young Muslims, teaching them Urdu, allowing them or helping them to retrieve their painful stories. So that actually, I believe, those were wonderful tools. I think we need such effort, such initiative in contemporary times. Particularly, we should have more awareness of history. We should make materials related to history available to this generation, and then we need to gather them in small groups and talk to them. So that is the only way we could cultivate this awareness about the precious Dakkani Tehzeeb.
And sir, talking about the popular notion, the opinion from the non-Muslim community is this cause and effect that I notice. Ki because, a very simplistic view about police action, ki because the Razakars did this, the Indian government had to attack and save the people. So how do you break this down? How do you get out of that cause and effect simplistic narrative? And how do you discover the several layers and complexities involved?
It's not easy, Moses, Bhai. Particularly the recent history is basically trying to produce these different tools of binaries, particularly between Hindus and Muslims. The entire history, actually normative history, is being rewritten in a way that promotes, that reproduces this binary. So most historians actually were subscribing to this. So actually you were asking about that question previously, I lost that track. So that history of binaries is nothing new. It is always there, right from the days of modernity. Nationalism, freedom struggle, and then progressive movement, and later every political movement you had this binary. We are all being guided by this, misguided by this binary. That's actually not the way Tehzeeb or any culture works. Culture is really fluid. It's not like a solid lump. It's always flowing. It's always an interaction. It's always a dialogue between among different cultures, religions, castes. Unfortunately, at this point, due to so many political reasons and then invoking of nationalism, particularly religious nationalism, the young minds, they are polluted by these binaries. So anti-Muslim sentiment is very, very, very immediate result, effect of this binary. Of course, cause and effect theory is there for everything. There is cause and effect, but even leftist theory too should not support that binary. So I actually want to throughout my writing, teaching, and activism, if there is anything like that, I want to work towards cultivating of this shared cultures. So what are the things that help us to share with each other? What is the mutuality between religions, between castes, between languages? So this is actually one big thing right now, is this tension between majoritarianism and minoritarian perspective, right? So we're still guided by, taken over by, controlled by, disciplined by majoritarianism. We need to break it. Majoritarianism is always a political perspective that helps political goals, that helps one specific, highly dominant segment of the society. We need to break it. We need to come up with alternative tools. The only way we can do is we need to go to the streets, talk to the ordinary people. One of the big categories in this book is this how do we understand ordinary people? How do we read history from the eyes of ordinary people? What are their perceptions of history making? So this is not going to happen in one day or 1 week. We need a continuous effort. There are so many miles to walk before we start talking about all these things.
Yeah.
Particularly, my focus right now is on this age group between 18 to 38 Muslims.
Excellent, yeah.
Muslim men and women. I want to talk to these people as much as possible, as extensively as possible. I want to share my work with them. Wherever I go, I sit with them, I will have conversations with them, and I want to learn from them. This is very important for me. I learn from them before I start giving back something to them. Of course, history and religious identities, that's where I basically work. And I need to see, of course, I also have this new work on Sufism. So I'm actually trying to connect all these materials just to speak about this Hindu-Muslim shared cultures.
Sir, you had mentioned about Bahadur Yarjan, this charismatic personality from the 1940s, who sort of, was, from what I've read, who was trying to bring the calm back together from religious sectarianism or whatever these, the distractions were. Now, there is an interesting conversation going on among the young journalists, the journalists of this generation. See, there's an ideology that Bahadur Yarjung held. And now, years later, now we have a person named Kasim Razvi, right? So how did things go from Bahadur Yarjung to Kasim Razvi? Some people, there is a notion that most, if not all, agree that
Right.
Kasim Razvi was a monster, right? But was Bahadur Yarjung the Frankenstein? Was it his ideology that created Kasim Razvi? What is your take on this?
That question, Moses bhai. I feel so bad when the history turned from Bahadur Yarjan to Kasim Razvi. Those are these things were happening very immediate. There was not much time difference, right? And I'm going to go back to Khudu Sahib in 2006, who said, he just said, these things are happening right now. But at that point during the 40s, we had Bahadur Yarjan. So he was the Hussein of Hyderabad. He literally used that. So many things are happening right now in contemporary India. We don't have Bahadur Yarjangs anymore. We don't have Husseins anymore. We are left with nothing. We lost those wonderful personalities. And then he also said something about Kasim Razvi. Yes, Kasim Razvi was a monster, no doubt about it. And then he actually made this term Razakar a very negative term. There is a chapter in the book, all Muslims are not the Razakars. That is the title of the chapter. That statement actually, that's not my statement. That came from one Razia Begum, who started talking about Razakars. Then she also mentioned about Bahadur Arjan, Kasim Razvi. And then she was being a communist. She that she was talking about all these things from the lens of leftism. I totally understand there is a difference in understanding things from the lens of leftism, but when it comes to these two big personalities, two extremely like opposite personalities, right? Bahadur Arjang and then Kasim Razvi. In Telugu literature, we have a lot of material that speaks about various ways Kasim Razvi led that Razakar military activism, but there was enough material to criticize Razakars, and then actually that also made Nizam a totally villain, big villain, anti-hero. Until then, Nizam was not like a villain in this history, right? So Kasim Razvi's activities made him a villain. So we need to understand these connections between Ittihad al-Muslimin, the early phase of Ittihad al-Muslimin, and the second phase, and the leadership, the public engagements of Bahadur Arjang, and then Kasim Razvi, and then Kasim Razvi's and Razakar's role in the public politics, public life. So that history, it still needs lot of work. I don't have enough materials right now to speak about that kind of history. Maybe in future, inshallah, I would take up that. But I feel so bad when we conflate these identities, like, okay, all Muslims are Razakars. If you hear these Afsar names like Afsar, Ashraf, they immediately, oh my gosh, you represent this Razakars legacy. No way. I don't have any connection. On the contrary, my family had this leftist legacy, leftist activism.
Who were fighting
that totally
for the
fought against both Nizam and Razakars, right?
Yeah.
So we need to understand those things. Yes, there are Muslims who fought against the Razakars,
Right.
who fought against Razvi's policies. So that history should be we need to create some awareness about that history among new generation Muslims and Hindus too. Is equally important.
Yeah.
That we should provide tools.
Like
then-
Makhdoom Saab is much more celebrated
Right.
in Telugu as a Telangana Bidda,
Right.
than in Urdu literature.
Right.
And the-
Yeah. Those interactions are also very important, right? So we need to get people to learn about these bilingual, and then two religious cultures coming together. There are so many things that we need to unpack.
The other confusion, sir, if you could, there are these two entities, Hindu Mahasabha and Andhra Mahasabha, who were working in the 1940s. And again, people get confused and people think it's the same force, whereas these two were, on the opposite ideology fronts. So if you could shed some light, who was Hindu Mahasabha and what were they doing, and who was Andhra Mahasabha and what were they doing in the 40s?
Of course, that history is still confusing, Moses Bhai. But we have scholars working on this kind of material. We have Rama Mantana's book that speaks about these nuances. But in my book too, I tried to bring some evidence. But my understanding is very limited as far as these histories are concerned. But but the way you are using these terms now is not the same terms back then. So the terminology has changed so much. When they are talking about Hindu, it's not the same Hindu identity as we are talking about discussing right now. So we need to understand that part. So that, but when you hear about Hindu now, that actually like really, really frustrating, right? But in Hyderabadi, Deccan history, those terms, they carry different meanings, different definitions. I believe I actually need to do more research before I respond to this question. That requires a lot of study and understanding, Moses.
Thank you, sir. Sir, would you share about your future projects? What is your next? What do you have in mind? Is it a book, or is it something else that you're working on? If you can shed some light on it.
Right now, Moses, it's also a big story. I actually don't know how to explain this future work because I usually don't have that big plans. My planning is like very narrow and then very like short term planning. But right now, because after working on Hyderabad and then urban Muslim question, but due to the focus on police action and that particular historical event, I couldn't focus on urban Muslim identity. I'm now actually conducting field research in Telangana and other parts of India as well to talk about, to understand how new generation Muslim men and women in urban places like Hyderabad, of course, this is all about Hyderabad, but still I have a lot of work to do on Hyderabad. And then other parts, other like urban, like areas like Khammam, Nalgonda, Mahbubnagar, Karimnagar, Warangal. So I actually want to see how can we understand the mind of a new Muslim generation. So what kind of tools they are using now to speak about their being and belongingness? Are they familiar with any like Muslim related histories or not? What is their connection with Urdu? And then what is their role in within their immediate community? So this is more about urban Muslim identity formation, but it's a long journey, Moses. Why? I'm not sure because this book took me almost 15 years. I'm so, of course, I was like very slow in writing this book. Not sure how long it takes. And then also I have another project about urban Sufi shrines and non-Muslim participation. As you know, more than ever, these urban Sufi shrines are becoming very popular right now. Even after 1992, I see a big transformation in non-Muslim participation, particularly at these urban Sufi shrines. So I want to see. Actually, this is also connected to the other work, urban Muslim identity. But this work about Sufi shrines is more about, just like my previous book in 2013, the first Muharram book. This is more about non-Muslim participation. This again goes back to this conceptualization of Tehzeeb, Dakkani Tehzeeb. But as I said, my planning is not that good. I'm very slow worker. And then I do other things, so many other things like writing in Telugu.
We have this excellent
Yeah,
book, which is a resource for the current and a very useful resource for the current and future
Right.
generation. So, if you can tell us, the audience, where can they get the book? Where is it available? What portals is it available?
This is published by Cambridge University Press. This is actually available, easily available on Amazon.
Amazon.
Amazon is, and also these people, marketing people at Cambridge, they are very prompt. They are very good in communicating. They even respond to individual emails and make arrangements to send a copy. I think it's not that difficult to get hold of the copy.
And am I true in remembering that the first set of copies, Amazon ran out of the first set and they are
Right.
reprinting? That's a great sign.
Right.
That people are actually receptive.
Right.
People are curious. People are hungry to know. Not just outsiders, but even people of Telangana. Finally, they have some resources, insights into their own history.
Right. I am so happy that because this is, of course, this is an academic writing, but even my previous book is, even though it was academic writing, it's like so popular among like community. But more than that, this time I see that community, particularly Hyderabadi community and Deccani communities, both Muslims and Hindus, they are taking this work very seriously. They're taking it very personally. Then wherever I go, I gave so many talks in USA, like in Chicago, Los Angeles, and I have invitations, Texas. Wherever I go, of course, I get my regular audience, like academic audience, literary audience. But this time, when I go there to give the talks, I see Hyderabadi diaspora everywhere. They come to me after the talk and then they want to have a chai with me, and then they kind of start talking about their connection with the police action, that late 1940s history, and then they also share their experiences, their family stories. So most of these people, they are actually, that's, I don't know, because they ask me, why don't you write about our diaspora, diaspora Hyderabadis? I know other scholars are working on this material.
Karen Leonard did some
Karen
amazing,
Leonard has this book, and
work on
then I have Mohammed, my good friend, Ali Khan, working on this kind of material. So I think they can do better job than me because of their connection with the diaspora and their understanding of diaspora and their understanding of materials from Urdu and other languages. So I want to read their work rather than my work.
Sir, thank you for giving a slice of your precious time. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका. मैं आपसे अलविदा लेना चाह रहा हूँ, but in the Telangana alai balai style. So if I can.
Thank you so much. So this is like such a wonderful and then very friendly conversation. Actually, I learned so much from your own work, Moses Bhai. I always, when I read your material and then even your Facebook posts, always there is something there to learn.
आप शर्मिंदा कर
So
रहे
I am very grateful to you.
हैं. Thank you. Sir.